Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to this session. Special welcome to our speakers today, the panel members, and welcome to the audience as well. Hope you're enjoying London Tech Week so far. Today we're going to be talking about blended learning and the digital and hybrid classroom of today. We've seen a lot of things happen over the past year and a half, but perhaps acceleration of trends we've seen already. We'll talk to our speakers about their experience, what they're trying to anticipate going forward, and really how they've experienced that shift to online learning. I'll pitch in some things as well, but before we do that, I'd love to go around the room and hear a little bit about everyone here today. So tell us a little bit, let's say a minute or so each, about yourself and how you've come to your current role and what you're working on currently. And I'll go around the room in the way that I see them on the screen. So I'll start with you, Manan, at the top left. I'll skip myself and then I'll go to Nina next. I'll go clockwise.
Sure, Marc, and thanks a lot for having me on this panel. My name is Manan. I'm the founder and CEO at QMath, which is a K-12 math learning company. I've actually been a math teacher, throughout my professional life, right out of college. And math is something I've always been very passionate about. So at QMath, we try to get kids to learn math in a very different way, in a mastery-based approach. And we have a live class platform where our teachers teach math to kids from all across the world. Today, we have more than 10,000 plus teachers teaching math to about 200,000 kids across the world. And we are based in India, but we have offices across the world. So at a very exciting time. And through the COVID pandemic, we actually saw huge growth, so would love to talk about some of that stuff today. But happy to be here, Marc.
Thanks, Manan. Over to you, Nina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am Nina. I'm head of EdTech at BESA, which stands for the British Educational Suppliers Association, and we work with around 400 companies who sell supplies to schools. Over half of our companies are operating in the EdTech space, and I've worked in the education sector since 2007. So before BESA, I was with the Times Educational Supplement.
Great. Thanks for that introduction, Nina. We'll move on to Ben next on my screen.
Thank you, Marc. Yes, so I'm Ben Sweetman. I'm Director for Content and Learning Design at QA. So QA is a UK-based provider of technology and digital skills. My role at QA is focused on both the learning design element and a kind of digital studio to create content. And I think particularly over the last 3 to 5 years, I'm now on my third blended learning transformation project, 2 pre-COVID and 1 during COVID. So thank you for having me.
Excellent, thank you. And Lawrence, final speaker.
Thanks, Marc. Yeah, I'm Lawrence Bolter. I'm the current chair of NACE, the Educational Technology Association. We're a charity that looks after, we hope, educational technology in the UK and beyond, and work with schools in offering improvement tools to help them progress in the use of technology. And for myself, I'm an ex-teacher of 35 years, been working as a consultant for the last 4 or 5 years.
Got a wealth of experience in the room, which is very, very exciting. Very different perspectives from tutoring and helping children get up to speed on math with new technologies and global platforms, to associations helping the UK advance technology in the classroom, and of course also blended learning for people in the workplace later on in life. That's also represented today. I'll give you a minute about myself so you also know who I am, as I'm going to be moderating the rest of this panel. My name is Marc. I'm a product director with Decoded, based in New York. But Decoded is a UK-based company in the technology education space. We help companies and governments upskill their staff, their leadership in topics around the digital landscape, ranging from data to cybersecurity to ways of working. I head up the leadership education part of the company, building out the roadmap to understand where leaders need to go next in terms of their own challenges and learning more about the buzzwords of technology around their company and in their sector. So I'm very excited. I bring in a bit of background of data science myself. I did my postgrad in operations management in the UK. So I spent a number of years applying machine learning and predictive analytics to warehousing fulfillment at a food company before widening my lens. And now I find myself in the classroom as much as I was during my PhD. I spent a lot of time teaching MBA students and executive MBA students in person, but I've also experienced as part of their executive education, lots of blended learning opportunities and sort of using new media to translate concepts to the classroom and also make sure that people can apply it in their daily lives, in their work. So well, perhaps closely aligned to Ben's work, but I also do very much appreciate everyone else in the room bringing in all those different perspectives. Now, what we'll do next is I've got a follow-up question, but I'll go around the room the other way. So I'll start with Lawrence and we'll work our way back to Manan. And the second question I have for everyone is just a little bit of extra about yourself. If you were to look or say, what is your one true educational passion? What's the one thing that gets you up in the morning and thinking more proactively about education? What's that one thing that kind of lights your fire? Lawrence, over to you.
Okay, I think about the same passion for the last 35, 40 years, to tell you the truth. And I think it started the first day I sat in front of a Model A BBC computer and started to understand what that offered for education as far as being able to provide pupils with exciting and meaningful learning experiences. But perhaps more importantly, is the potential for offering pupils routes through their own learning. And that's what drives me, that we can give pupils context, that they can find their own way through the learning. And that, in essence, challenges quite a lot of traditional education, the way that the pedagogy is set up. So, and I think I've just been on a journey that's been following that for the last 40 years, to tell the truth. How fast we've moved, I'm not quite so sure. Sometimes, but that's the thing that keeps me going.
That's very exciting. I love that idea of context and making it more meaningful. And the fact that that is still a challenge is something that we should, well, we're talking about it today. And perhaps what we've seen over the past year and a half, 2 years has given us more opportunities to go in the direction you've been wanting to go for 40 years, Lawrence. So let's see what we can get to in this call. Perhaps we can't find the solutions. How about you? What's your true passion about? What lights your fire in education?
Yeah, no, I think for me, it's always been a lot of my 20 years now in the kind of learning and training industry has been in apprenticeships, and I think carrying that now into other areas. But is this idea that learning breaks down barriers to get great careers and to get into industries, and particularly in tech, there's an amazing range of opportunities for people that actually we can use learning to kind of remove old-fashioned traditional barriers to getting into the industry and great jobs. And I think also always a burning sense there's a better way to do this, particularly from a learning point of view. Definitely drives me day to day. So that's
right.
me.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. I'm picking up on a couple of things there. People choosing their pathways, breaking barriers. So continuing learning beyond traditional education, right? Adults keep doing that as well. And that burning desire to do better, I think we all have that. So that's very, very exciting. And Nina, over to you for the same question.
For me, it always comes back to the children. I love to be part of an industry that is helping to make a difference and giving children different ways to learn. Every child learns at a different pace in a different way, and I think the one thing I love about education technology is that it can help the teacher to really enhance the learning experience for different students, and can empower and instill confidence and make learning fun and interesting for those children that don't necessarily respond well to traditional teaching and learning methodology and pedagogy.
Meeting children where they're at and recognizing diversity, right? And being inclusive in so many different ways. Technology can help us.
Absolutely, and helping them to build confidence, and showing them that they can do it, and helping them to find their voice.
Right. Yeah. Learning is all about confidence, right? At the end of the day, if I look back, it's a while back now, I think, for all of us, the primary school, secondary school classrooms, but the idea of the better teachers, the better environments are the ones that give you confidence to learn, and that actually creates passion, ends up being probably the track that you choose, right? Rather than whatever you're best at naturally. Manan, over to you.
Yeah, Mark, for me, my educational passion is linked to my personal passion around math. Math is something I've always loved since I was a young kid. And I see math more as a life skill today, especially in today's age, as the rise of technology and AI. I think of math almost like a second language that every kid should be proficient at. It's a way of thinking. And it's pretty ironic that kids across the world fear math, they struggle with it. In general, every kid is wired to be great at math, but the way they are taught is, pretty broken. So that's what I'm trying to solve with QMath. And, I'm first and foremost a teacher at heart. So I like to teach kids how to think and reason, how to learn math the right way. And when I see them doing that, I've been doing that for 16 years now. Personally, I've taught more than 10,000 kids myself. So it's very, very gratifying to see the transformation, that you can have when you teach kids the right way. So yeah, and very excited to be doing the work I'm doing at QMath now, and taking that impact to millions of kids across the world.
It's transformation at scale, 10,000 learners. That's quite fantastic and amazing. Incredible journeys that we're all on, and we find ourselves in this room together, chatting virtually, as if it couldn't be more challenging, right? But we're doing it in a global setting, so that's what's really exciting. I'm excited that we're spanning 3 continents, we're spanning different places, different time zones, and different experiences, and yet we have a common understanding to some extent, and we're here to explore that. So in the next bit, what I'd like to do is not necessarily go around the circle every time, because it would become very static. So let's hop around the room a little bit. For the next set of questions, I want to look back briefly on the past year and a half or so on some of the challenges. And I'm understanding that we have slightly different focuses on the room. Some are focusing on earlier education, and some are focusing more on lifelong continued education. Let's start with the younger learners, because that's what we've seen a lot in the news. We've seen a lot of challenges around the learning environment for the children that maybe aren't used to doing things remote, haven't necessarily used virtual technology and conferencing technology before, but suddenly had to adjust to that, as well as everything else that comes with it. And I think, Nina, you were talking about inclusivity of the environment, making sure that children's needs are met. In that space, with all the people that you work with at BISA, all of your members, what do you think is the most challenging thing that you've witnessed, or even you've seen inside of BISA yourself, navigating this past year?
I think the one thing that immediately springs to mind is the digital divide. It very quickly became apparent that industry was ready to step in, helps us support teachers and learners, but many children who were having to learn at home just simply didn't have the devices with which to learn, or if they did, it was one laptop among 3 children of different ages learning at different stages. And in some families, I'm sure that laptop was also being used for parents who had to work from home, as well as trying to teach their children. So I think that was a frustration that was addressed by government, but it just seemed to take a long time to actually get the devices to the children that needed them. And I think for me, well-being was a challenge as well. I'm just thinking, how are these kids, how are they? And I know the teachers that I've spoken to as well were very focused on that. And I think it was just the frustration of knowing that we were there and our members were ready to help, but it was just like getting to them fast enough. So it was great. It was great to see the bonding that took place between suppliers and their customers, but also to see how the community got involved as well, and how parents really stepped up and connected with schools in a way I think many of them wouldn't have done for a while had the pandemic not had happened. So and for me, into just a personal frustration was I love to learn. I love to try and learn something new every day, every week. I set aside a development day, and for me the frustration was just trying to keep up. There was so much new guidance coming out, there was so much happening, so many fantastic panels, conferences, people coming together sharing guidance and advice, and I found it really hard to just keep abreast of everything. But my goodness, what a beautiful sector to work in. Everyone's so altruistic and there for each other, really supportive of each other.
I think that's true, isn't it? There were a lot of voices out there for quite a while, wasn't there? And I don't worry about what the teachers were hearing at their end. What their focus, where their focus was landing, because it could have been a lot of places, and I'm not quite sure whether they were finding it easy to navigate through what was being shared with them.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a sense of overwhelm at the beginning.
So between you, Lawrence, and Nina, where would you say the biggest friction was? Was it in supply of the hardware, perhaps Wi-Fi access, teachers, or the learners at the end of the day? Which was the largest friction to overcome?
Well, I tend to focus more on the teachers, I think, and I wonder where they get their skills on. I mean, when we conducted our survey at NACE, we discovered there's quite a lot of teachers felt very confident, were very confident they can deliver, which was great. But I wonder about the paradigms they were teaching with. I think many were just trying to replicate a classroom practice online, and I think that gave them a pressure, and alienated as well, because if you're relying on that synchronous learning, then that's what ties up your laptop for the day, or makes conflicts and what have you. So I think there were lots of issues around that area that I think brought to bear, really.
Understood. Yeah. Thank you, Lawrence. And Manon, from your perspective, globally speaking, of course, Nina and Lawrence, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a focus on specifically the UK and the situation there. The globe was affected by this, and children learn differently across the world, and that access to laptops, access to internet might be even a bigger issue elsewhere in the world. What's your perspective on that, Manon?
No, I think, Marc, for us, given that our target audience is K-12 students, and within that subset also, the center of gravity lies within the K-8 segment, so essentially young learners. I think the challenge for us was more like, how do we get to the gold standard of, a one-to-one offline kind of experience in a virtual setting, and how do you hold that engagement of young learners, for an hour-long class and so on. So we basically, and today we have more than 200,000 learners on the platform, and we basically realized that there are 3-4 principles that that any platform, any virtual platform working with young learners must incorporate. One of them is obviously that there should be no passive learning, either via self-serve videos or via lectures. The learning experience has to be very active. The student has to be driving the learning process actively most of the time during the class, instead of listening passively to the teacher. Then I think there should be a one-to-one interaction with the teacher present. That makes a world of difference. Then the curriculum, the content that you're serving to the student at any point should be perfectly calibrated to the learner's current level of competence. We call it the Goldilocks zone. So planet which is just in the right zone from the host star. You have to have content in the Goldilocks zone for any learner. And then you have to ensure a lot of engagement loops through gamification and things like that to make sure that learners are always kind of being gratified as they progress. So I think more than a challenge, it has been a lot of building, a lot of incorporating of these practices to make sure that learner engagement is continuously high, and we've seen that pan out very well. So yeah, I think we've been able to get to a place where our virtual class, online class experience is as close to the gold standard of a one-to-one offline experience with an expert tutor.
Excellent. Love those 4 principles. Perhaps worthwhile writing a blog about that and making sure we can all read it back. Otherwise, yeah. I'll lean on the audience to take note and make sure we share this afterwards once we got it out there. But yeah, no, those are great points. What about you, Ben? How do you see these principles or some of the experiences from Nina and Lawrence paralleled in the working world and the learners that are a bit further on in their life?
Yes, it's interesting. So I was thinking about this. it's a double-edged sword, the amount of change I think we've had this year. There's a real positive side of it, which is it's moved this kind of transition to digital and the open-mindedness to learn digital in a digital way faster than, it's probably 10 years worth of, from a stats point of view of what we've seen. But at the other side, I think the thing we found hardest is we're trying to create a new blended learning way to learn. But normally you'd be innovating from a base of assumptions that you knew how people work. It's pretty stable. It's changed a bit every year. Whereas this year, we've had to go, when we're doing this, we're questioning every assumption, like, where are people? Like, where are they? How are they learning? What's going on around? What's going on that side of the screen? But I think so what we've seen is in trying to design new blended learning experience, that's been really hard. Just even what would previously been a really simple assumption just doesn't hold anymore for us. So we have to question it. And then it changes again. And that's what we found. It's like, last May looked like one thing. And then August came around and learners started booking different things and behaving differently. And it's like, and it's changed again. And now, so I think that is just getting used to that. And I know then internally, there's an element of, in my team, there's an element, can we have some stability? And I'm not sure I can offer you that yet. I'm not sure that we've got back to a stable base of going, this is what hybrid working is going to look like. And we certainly don't yet know what next year, how people will use training in person versus, will I want to do my learning when I've got my home days, or will I want to do my learning when I've got my office days? I don't know. And so that's the hardest thing, I think. Just, I wish none of us have a crystal ball, but it's just the change is so profound and it keeps coming. So
there's no break for anyone, I don't think, Ben. It's no break to come, but at least maybe what we've learned is to be more flexible, malleable to the situation. If there is one positive thing that remains, and I'm welcoming everyone to suggest anything, one positive thing that you've seen, despite all the challenges, that you want to blow up a bit more and kind of make into a bigger thing, something you've seen develop that you'd like to persist and continue, what would that be?
Yeah, maybe I'll respond to that, Mark. I think for us, the biggest, obviously the macro situation with COVID has been, not great, but I think from an education EdTech point of view, I think one of the biggest upsides has been just this tectonic shift in, acceptance levels around online and virtual learning. I think it's kind of permanent. I think the momentum will continue going forward. I think going forward, learners and parents will be a lot more willing to accept online as a viable and effective mode of learning, and maybe supplementing offline in various ways. And, as Ben said, change worth a decade happened over the course of just a few months. So I think you'll see a lot more quality kind of coming into the ecosystem. Entry barriers have gone down now that anyone can, get online and, start delivering very high quality education services. So in that sense, I think from a learner's point of view, access to high quality services will just go through the roof, and acceptance of this model of learning, will definitely persist even after COVID. So that's been one upshot of, this whole phase.
Yeah, I love this idea. So we've heard barriers before, right? Barriers for learners, but this is barriers to entry into the market. And then maybe education now has finally moved into the internet age. And as a result, this kind of, innovation happening at a much higher pace that we've seen in other sectors. Ben, you're at the edge of your seat to respond.
I like that blended learning used to be just an industry term. Yeah. And now, pretty much blended learning is, I think pretty much everyone could at least have a stab at defining what it is and have heard it in the news. And so suddenly, it gives us a really, I think, a good platform to now discuss what it really should be from that basis ago. And it's, widely understood now, as opposed to being a bit niche, which it was.
And Ben, so I've heard a few technical terms, which I think all of us really appreciate, but for the audience, I've heard, we're talking about hybrid classrooms, we're talking about online learning, we're talking about synchronous versus asynchronous learning, and perhaps all encompassing is this idea of future of blended learning. Ben, give us maybe your definition of what dimensions do you kind of take into this idea of blended learning? How would you define it?
Yeah, so I think our overarching design principle is that what blended is almost, you don't decide the modality before you go into it. Is actually our approach to what is anybody, but in our case generally someone in work, trying to learn, what are they trying to achieve, what's the outcome? And then when you work back from it, you go, well, actually, as part of that, there's an ability to choose the right modality for the piece of that journey. And ultimately, that's it, is using all of the various options at our disposal, rather than presupposing, in our case, don't presuppose that the answer is a 5-day training course before you've even found out what your learner wants to achieve out of it. And I think that's our definition, and that's, maybe it's more than a definition, it's a design principle for us, is that use whatever mode best suits. And crucially, I guess, with blended is that it's normally more than one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's, I guess, the idea of the blend. The thing that comes out is special. Lawrence, from your perspective, you're focused on teachers, but also having been a teacher yourself, been in the industry for a long time, this idea of blended learning has been perhaps part of what you've seen develop in using technology in education over time. Are we ending up in a place that you thought we'd be, or has your definition of what blended learning should look like shifted also?
I think blended, the concept of blended learning, whereas if you take it as a teacher selecting from a toolbox of different ways of delivering a thing, has always existed. That's part of the teacher's craft, isn't it? Where they have to decide the best way that they're going to deliver something, to give variety of experience, or to get to achieve something, and to add some texture to what they're delivering to the pupils. So in that sense, the introduction of technology has not changed that notion that part of the teacher's craft is to put together sequences of lessons and stimulus that are going to help pupils. So if we come back to teach, but then that relies on the teacher's competence and confidence in using that. So I think whatever the fantastic kit and resources are offered, unless the teachers feel confident that they can incorporate those. And one of the things we're talking about, the challenges and frustrations, or maybe the last year, is that I don't know, and I'm going to come back to words before, I don't know what the teachers have seen. I don't know how the average teacher gets exposed to all the fantastic stuff that's gone on over the last year. There's been lots of teachers who've been in schools who have made great inroads in developing their pedagogies and their capacities to teach. Does the average teacher see that? I'm not so sure. And there's an irony in that, because the whole thing is about a technology that enables sharing and enables people to communicate and work together. And I think that's where I feel that we could have done better. I suggest that in supporting teachers, in putting together frameworks that just we could have sort of thrown things to them, as a society, if you like, could have peppered them with new ways, stimulus, new ways of doing things and what have you. And I think they've been sat in front of their screens trying to run classes, in a fairly traditional model, and not had the opportunity for that excitement. And I'd like to think that we could pull together. And there have been, you listen to some people, some commentators at the moment, and they are worried about how we can hang on to that progress that we made, and how can we ensure that we don't drop back, which is a real danger, I think, as schools get back into their regular routines. And I'm hoping that we can continue with that debate, and there's enough there for it to stick, and for us to carry on exploring.
Right. Yeah. I do anticipate this. We're seeing this a little bit at Decoded ourselves, as we're getting our first clients to ask, can we do things in person again? So we have to. The question now is, do we just pick up where we left off a year and a half ago and pick up those practices, or do we think more constructively and challenge those assumptions once more, basically, not only in the content, but also in the delivery style and the way we book our travel to places and everything that comes with making sure the learner meets the teacher at the end of the day, right? Nina, from your perspective, when we talk about blended learning, I'm interested in the suppliers and perhaps how those suppliers are responding to the challenge Lawrence is putting out there. Like, how are we giving teachers and learners what they need in terms of the hardware, technology, furniture, everything that comes with building that right environment for blended learning? Does that look different today, or is it simply using existing tools, existing equipment, and putting in a different combination to make that happen?
First of all, I think the success stories, and I caveat everything I'm about to say in that I live in a EdTech bubble. So the majority of teachers in schools that I speak with are using education technology efficiently, and they see the benefits of it, and they're very good at sharing that best practice with others. But I always say to the younger, sort of the startup companies that I work with, as they begin to penetrate the market, that there's no such thing as a quick sale. It's not a sale and walk away. You're beginning a relationship with the school and a relationship with those teachers, and it has to be sustained. And you have to continually check in with your customers, because what they purchased 2 years ago may no longer be fit for purpose now. So you have to continually revisit that and make sure that it is fit for purpose and that you are building. I think once everybody got over the initial shock of schools having to operate in a different way, and I never say when schools closed, because for the most part they didn't close, and I think a lot of teachers that I speak with become irate when people say, oh, schools in the UK closed, because teachers had to work incredibly hard, not only to deliver remote learning, but also to teach the children that were in school as well. So I think there was a strengthening of relationships amongst industry and teachers where those relationships had existed well in the first place. In the same way where the schools already had digital strategies in place to a degree, they were able to pivot and adapt the way they delivered their teaching and learning much quicker than the schools and teachers who had been perhaps a little bit risk averse about technology and were still dipping their toe in the water. And I think sorry, I am getting to the answer, but I think one of the positives about what we all went through, and Lawrence, I agree with what you're saying, in that there must be so many teachers out there who don't know where to begin in terms of where to find the right tech and how to use it to its maximum capacity. But I think that one of the things that I most enjoyed seeing was the fact that the teachers, that they were really exploring the full potential of what they had at their fingertips in a way that they perhaps wouldn't have done so unless they'd absolutely needed to. So it was just finding ways in which to use it to really bring the learning to life, but also to save time as well. And they were finding, even I shouldn't say even me, that sounds terrible. I myself discovered ways, about applications that I'd been using for years. And, oh my goodness, I didn't realise it could do this. This is going to save me so much time. And I just think we all had time to really explore. And I think industry responded really well to that, because they were very keen to help. And I think teachers, I did see a lot of barriers coming down in terms of teachers were willing to connect and engage, and it was great. And at BESA we do a roadshow called LearnEd. That is a conference that gives teachers who are using technology a platform to tell other teachers about how they're using technology, why they're using it, and what outcomes they're doing. So I think we have seen a start of learn something, share something in a way that I hope stays, and I hope really sort of continues to take off. And to speak to how industry responded to the environment in which children learn, when schools did start to fully reopen, we had conditions here. Everyone had to walk in one direction. There were you needed to wash your hands every 5 seconds. There had to be sanitizer using it. Playgrounds were cordoned off because it was unhygienic for children to be using the same slide and things like that. So industry had again had to step up and respond to those needs, and it was a case of, like Ben said, you have to anticipate what's going to be needed, but we're working, it's a movable feast, it's really difficult and so dependent on government guidance as well. So we were all glued to hear what's coming out next.
I love your take on everyone bonding together and responding to those challenges, and finding new challenges to overcome along the way there. That's something that we've seen. But I picked up on something specific as well, which is a lot of the focus on how we use technology in the classroom or with learning might be to do with how do we land the same content in a same or better way? How do we make sure that teachers are comfortable delivering all that? But there's something that you said about working smarter, going forward, being more efficient, that I found interesting. That's traditionally where we talk about technology, and Decoded, obviously, when we talk about technology to clients, it's mostly about cost saving, being more efficient, finding new opportunities. It's not about using technology to train necessarily. That comes with what we deliver. I'll switch to Ben, because maybe you've seen that similarly happening, that discussion around efficiency of learning or efficiency of working smart in the education world through technology.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because probably one of the things we did in the apprenticeship business. Now, we've done it just before COVID, which I'm very grateful for, but probably the technology bit was actually Zendesk, all right? So it's not an educational, but what was more fundamental is we changed the way we supported apprentices, it was a chat-based model with a learning help desk behind them. And what's interesting about that was that we went from our apprentices often waiting, 4-6 weeks to see someone again in a classroom, because that's the work-based model traditionally, to what we said in our new apprenticeship model was that actually we'll answer your query within 4 hours and we'll mark your assignment in a working day. And what we found with that is this bit about it, as like I said, what it changed fundamentally is how quickly a learner can progress, because we took away this huge elapsed time that was existing in work-based learning, and it's very traditional, that old model. And suddenly, learners, when we did the UX research on it, the state that they described as stuck, really often they said, "I'm stuck. I'm waiting for feedback, and I don't really know what to do next." Suddenly, by going, all right, it's only Zendesk, but reorganizing and rethinking the way we give learners feedback and how to get them going quickly, just totally transformed how quickly apprentices progress. And how honestly their likelihood to stay on their program to the end. And in a sense, it is a technology innovation, because chat, there isn't the element of that. But the much bigger one was just rethinking that fundamental interaction and how do you stop learners being in a stuck state. And so that, I think, to answer the question, that for me is probably one of the biggest rethinks we've had in our world of work-based learning. And yeah, I think, like I said, we just started it before COVID. I'm very grateful we did, because I think it's got a lot of apprentices through the year safely and kind of got them to the end of their program in a good state. So
it's super exciting how you can see parallels in customer experience, customer service, that we've seen so many other technologies play a role here as well. Manan, I was reading on the QMath website about your Leap platform, and I imagine that you've had to integrate so many other parts of technology into the platform to make that happen, to make learners unstuck. So if you were to reply to Ben, what's your strategy been to make sure that learners can progress at their pace and use technology to get themselves unstuck on your platform?
Yeah. So Marc, obviously, because all our delivery is online, we do a lot of tech stuff like live chat and assessments and stuff like that, right? But if I go at the most fundamental level, I think the challenge that we have, that every EdTech player and education system has, is that as you scale to millions of learners, how do you make sure that each learner on the platform is benefiting, is actually getting those learning outcomes that they desire, And I talk about this internally, but if you think about pharma companies, for example, every drug that they create, they have to prove its efficacy, right? If a drug doesn't work, the patient is never blamed, But in education, it's different. Everyone is quick to blame the learner first, the student first, and everyone is quick to say that the student is not capable and so on. But especially when it comes to children, and especially in the context of math learning, if a child is struggling with math, it's everyone else is to blame but the child. It's not the child's fault. So how do you create a platform? How do you use technology to personalize learning to a user base of one as you are scaling to millions of learners, right? I think that is really the challenge in front of us. How do you keep the learner at all points in the Goldilocks zone? How do you create demonstrable outcomes, provable outcomes? And you're able to say that, okay, this kid has really mastered this concept, this topic. And I think that is the holy grail for us. So we're actually in the process of a lot of AI, ML based work to adapt the kids' learning path in real time, to make sure that they're always in that Goldilocks zone. And if you're able to crack that, I think we will be able to build a system that essentially personalizes every student's learning experience. But it's hard. It's tough.
Yeah.
Love that idea. Segment of one, and using technology to keep people in that Goldilocks zone. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, so we're, as far as I'm aware, we're coming up to about 45 minutes. So I want to try and transition towards like next steps, where you're at, what you're looking forward to. And I know, Lawrence, you were just about to say something. So perhaps if you wanted to respond to Manan, or if you want to go to that next question and say sort of, as we switch over and we've learned all these things, what's up ahead for you? What are you looking forward to in the next year?
Okay, yeah, I was going to talk to Manan about giving pupils opportunities to follow their own routes. That Goldilocks zone is not necessarily defined by the educators; it's defined by the child themselves, isn't it? So they decide what their next steps in, and that provision in making that, offering them their next steps is your job, I guess. Really, the bit that puzzles you the most, I should think, is making sure that they've got routes that take them through things. But moving the forward bit, really interesting this week in that I've just signed off we've just published in our latest journal this month, and I usually do a frontispiece for a read, and I'll read it through and what have you. And there was a theme in there that hadn't really occurred to me before, and I think it's quite an important one. In that we talked about barriers. But one of the themes that come out of it is the movement of education outside of the classroom, and the rest of the world becoming part of that sandbox. That the pupils live in, and I think that's quite exciting. And it was reassuring to me that some people have hung on to that thought through all we've been through, and saying, well, what this does, it actually removes the walls of the school. And that means that you got the chance. There's a fantastic article about the potential of using AI to put learning experiences in the street, for pupils, where they can do things. And you think that's sort of going in. That's quite mind blowing in some, but so exciting, to think about. And then you start to wonder about, what is the distinction for education and real life? Where is that? Where their edges becoming blurred? And I think that's sort of the natural consequence, isn't it, of this journey that we're on? Maybe is that learning is an all-time, anywhere learning. It happens all the time, every time, which we all know adults do naturally anyway. And I think there's an interesting little journey to go on, that we're going to go on to, where those barriers come down. And one of the things that I think that might help with that is the pupils working collaboratively with the people who aren't pupils. We only think of collaboration in terms of the pupils in their own classroom. We keep them in their box, don't we? But I've in the past I've had experiences where you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning with pupils to chat with in London, with pupils in Australia, and have that collaboration. And I think the thought of schools collaborating with business, with people out of work, with other people in different learning contexts, is a really exciting prospect. There's a lot of learning to be done there, isn't there? Talking of cross culture, cross context like that.
Love that. Yeah. Global aspect, very, very challenging, but one of the most exciting things I've seen over the past year is just to jump on these types of sessions with different types of learners' needs, and coming together, learning through technology. I like your idea of what's beyond the classroom, what's beyond class time. So quick whip around the room, just so we make sure we end in time, and we can always keep chatting after that. Ben, over to you. What's next up on what's on your docket? What are you focusing on currently?
Yeah, so I think you think about the pandemic, it was sort of digital blended by emergency, wasn't it? You just had to do this stuff. And what we've taken out of that is moving to a more by design model. So, we're calling it total learning, actually, to try and almost make us think that it's something different. But so for us, that is, and I think it is different. I mean, and for us, that's going, well, what is the live experience? What is the magic of a live experience that you can only do there? It's interactive, it's peer-to-peer, as Lawrence said, and also the expertise of a trainer is where you make the most of it. And then you go, well, actually, a digital experience is for something else. It's more about foundational skills and knowledge. And then I think probably most exciting for us is then, it's got us to that place of reaching deeper into what is the workplace, and thinking about almost the holy grail of what was the training industry is actually, we think now there's a really clear way that we can not just help learners apply skills at work, but prove it. And that's where we're heading, in the next year or so. And yeah, I think it's accelerated the move to that, and gives us, I think, the confidence that actually the wider community of learners and companies are now in a position to accept that sort of different approach to learning, and not necessarily just doing things the way we've always done it. So that's what's exciting for us, and that's the next year or so, moving to more kind of this new designed way of thinking about learning, and it being learner centric rather than kind of content centric.
Can I ask you something, Ben? Is that all right? Ben, what do you think? Do you think that teachers, if we're talking about blended learning and teachers having been pulling together experiences and what have you, do you think that's we often, on the other hand, we often talk about new roles, new jobs, new skills that get defined by technology. Do you think that teachers are expected to do too much in trying to stitch together those experiences? Or do you think there is room for a more specialist role that may not be within the school to put together programs of work and those experiences? Like an LX designer.
I love that question, because I think, when in somewhere like QA, you can have my team where it's a specialist set of learning architects and digital and everything, and we can do a lot of the legwork for our trainers. Whereas I think you're right, in a teacher's environment, a lot of it is that they are sort of expected to do all of that on their own, and it's really hard. I mean, I think everyone hopefully has a greater respect for what teachers do after this year, but yeah, finding ways of giving them more of that almost benefit of someone else doing some of the legwork for them would no doubt help every teacher out massively, I think.
I think so, yes. Yeah.
Great question, Lawrence. And I'll keep my eye out for total learning, another blog post that I would like to see something about. Ben, Nina, what's on your docket? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I am going to be working to ensure that education technology is not seen as an emergency response to pandemic situations, and that the appetite to play with it, find out more about it, and use it to save teachers time, help them, teach their lessons. The innovation happens because of the way in which the teacher uses technology. It's not the technology necessarily that is innovative, but that you talk about tools and solutions that will assist the teacher to deliver. There's many solutions out there, but it's what the teacher does with it. That's where the innovation happens, I think. So it's about helping those teachers who are passionate about the use of EdTech, helping them to spread the word amongst their peers through the work we do at BISA, but also from the industry perspective to continue to support the companies who have had an incredibly tough year. You know, the larger companies have been incredible and resilient and robust, and they've helped. But some of the younger startups who weren't able to acquire funding, they've had a tough year, and it's been incredibly hard in terms of acquiring new sales. So it's supporting them to help raise their profile and showcase what they're doing as well, and you know, getting them to begin those relationships with teachers. But I think it's been awful for all of us. But I think the thing that hopefully we've unraveled in this conversation is that there have been so many seeds planted that it's our job to sort of help to nurture and make sure they continue to grow.
Of the idea of nurture beyond our current state. We've learned things, let's grow from here and then take a positive outlook. How about you, Manan? What's happening at QMath? What are you working on currently?
Yeah, Mark, very quickly. One dimension obviously is the business expansion. You know, we will be present in more than 50 countries by next year with a math learning platform. But I'm much more excited about how our learning experience, you know, is evolving and the roadmap around that. So one of the things that we are working on very strongly, very deeply is how do we get students to realize that math is everywhere around them, you know, in the real world. So for example, the math of climate change, the math of COVID-19 spread, you know, it spreads exponentially, and even very young students at QMath draw binary trees to understand exponential growth and why wearing masks is important and so on, right? Or let's say, you know, you can change the outcome of a voting system by redrawing the boundaries of a district and stuff like that. So we just get kids to see that math applies everywhere. That's one. The other thing, you know, as Lawrence said, we are trying to evolve an experience where it's the learning process is a lot more collaborative, because, you know, in the real world, problem solving, any enterprise of worth is collaborative, you know, especially when it comes to science and technology. Like this Hungarian, I remember this Hungarian scientist, Michael Polanyi, he spoke about a republic of science. You know, it's a collaborative effort. So there's no reason why kids should not see that when they're young, why kids should not engage in a collaborative problem solving effort, you know, coming together, working on projects together, solving real world problems together and so on. So we are introducing a lot of those elements into the curriculum as well, which we believe will give kids a very holistic experience. So yeah, exciting times in terms of the learning experience roadmap.
Of that real world, redrawing the maps of electoral districts. Wow, that's fast. If we could start that earlier, we could solve more problems there too. I'm going to wrap up our discussion. It was great having you all here. I want to thank Manan, Nina, Ben, and Lawrence for their time this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever they are in the world. And same for you, the audience today. I hope this was a useful discussion, that you've taken away a couple key concepts and a couple things that have brought our experiences together that apply to your world as well. One thought that I had to leave you with is something that I'm going to borrow, and I hope that's okay, from one of our clients we were talking about. And this is, I'm paraphrasing into a different domain. This is not about education, but I'll use it in the education setting. That it's not so much about digitally enabled education in a challenging world, but it's really about education in the digital world. So let's shift the paradigm and use this idea of blended learning to address learners where they're at, teachers where they're at, and use technology to work smarter, not just to do the same job in a different way. So that's exciting, and we've got lots of opportunities that we can work on. Hopefully that brings together some of the topics that we've also heard about today. So thanks once more. Enjoy the rest of London Tech Week, and we hope to see you again sometime in the future, be it virtually or in person. All right, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very welcome. Bye-bye.